Okay, in problem set 4, you learned about adding like terms. That's a really important concept that is crucial. We're going to use that the whole quarter. But you notice how adding like terms is very similar to adding integers, isn't it? As long as they're like terms, it works kind of the same way. That's true with a lot of things in algebra. To be good at algebra, you really have to have your integer arithmetic down really well. In this problem set, we're going to introduce the concept of additive inverses, which is really just the same thing as opposites. But before we do that, let's look at some examples. Let's review a little bit. Simplify. Okay, so how many terms you see? Any like terms? Yeah, you can add the negative 6x to the 7x and get positive 1x. Let me just write that as x plus 5. You can't combine these because they're not like terms. Okay, how about this one? How many terms do you see here? Any like terms? Can I add these a's together even though they're not next to each other? Is it okay to do that? Remember what that rule is called? When you add negative 5a plus 4a, you get negative 1a. It works kind of like integers, right? Negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1, so this would be negative 1a, which we just call negative a. Now, what is 6ab plus negative 6ab? Those are like terms. They both have exactly the same variables. Well, what is 6 plus negative 6? It's 0, right? So this would be 0ab, which is just the same thing as 0. So you'd leave your answer like this. Okay, how about this one? Remember this? This goes way back to problem set 1. This is an open sentence because, well, it's a sentence because it has an equal sign. It's open because it's neither true nor false. What do you add to 8 to get 0? What number do you add to 8 so it equals 0? The answer is negative 8. Now, that's the concept of additive inverses. Actually, the definition is two numbers are additive inverses of each other. So 8 and negative 8 are actually additive inverses of each other because their sum is 0. That's the definition. Two numbers are additive inverses if their sum is 0. Now, it really is the same concept as the opposites because when you have 3, the opposite of 3 was negative 3, and guess what happens if you add 3 plus negative 3? You get 0. So saying two numbers add up to 0 is the same exact thing as saying that they're reflections across 0. Okay? When you reflect a number across 0, that's not the same. That means the same thing as saying their sum is 0. If you reflect negative 4 across 0, you get 4, and guess what the sum of those two numbers is? 0, right? If you have a number a, remember this is an unknown number, let's say, the additive inverse would be well, we can say negative a. It's probably better to say the opposite of a because we don't know if the opposite of a is positive or negative because we don't know if a is positive or negative. So it might not be good to say negative a. That seems to imply it's a negative number. It doesn't have to be. If a is over here, then the opposite of a would be over here. And if a is over here, then the opposite of a would be over here, right? I know sometimes I say negative a too, but it's probably better to say the opposite of a. Okay, here we go. So let's find the additive inverse or opposite of a number. What's the opposite of 5? Negative 5. Notice the sum of these two numbers will always be 0, right? That's the definition. What's the opposite of negative 13? Or the additive inverse would be positive 13. The sum will be 0. What's the additive inverse of 1.042? It's negative 1.042. What's the opposite of negative 3/4? We'll talk about fractions a lot in chapter 2. What do you add to negative 3/4 to get 0? Positive 3/4. What's the opposite of a number y? We don't know if y is positive or not. It doesn't make any difference. But the way you would write the opposite would be the opposite of y, or the additive inverse of y. What's the opposite of negative a? I said it. I should say what is the opposite? What is the opposite of the additive inverse of a? What is the opposite of this number? It would be a, wouldn't it? Because when you add this number to this number, even though you don't know if a is positive or not, you know it equals 0. What's the opposite of 3m? What's the additive inverse of 3m? Negative 3m. The additive inverse of negative 3x plus y. What do you add to this to get 0? Well, here's a hint. For this to add something to this to get 0, both terms have to add up to 0 because they're not like terms. So you can look at each term separately. What do you add to negative 3x to get 0? 3x. What do you add to y to give 0? Negative y. So the additive inverse or opposite of this expression would be 3x plus negative y. That's how it works. This is the additive inverse of what? In other words, what do you add to this to get 0? Each term has to add up to 0, so you get negative a plus 5b. That's e, right? How about this? What's the opposite or additive inverse of this expression? What do you add to this to give 0? Each term has to add up to 0, so you're going to have a negative 6x plus 3y plus negative z. There you go. All right, why don't you try some? Try these, see if you can do these. We'll go over these in just a minute. Okay, here we go. So what's the opposite or additive inverse of negative 23? It'd be positive 23, right? What's the opposite of w? Or you can say w is the opposite of what number? What do you add to w to give 0? Negative w, right? What's the additive inverse of negative 2abc? It would be 2abc. What's the opposite of 0? What is negative 0 or the opposite of 0? Well, what do you have to add to 0 to get 0? Another way to say it is, what do you get when you reflect 0 across itself? The answer is, it doesn't move. 0 is its own additive inverse, right? It's the only number like that. What do you add to x plus 2y to give 0? What's the additive inverse? This is the additive inverse of what number? The answer would be negative x plus negative 2y. Now remember, you can always check, right? If you add this plus this, you should always get 0. What's the additive inverse of this number? Each term has to add up to 0, so you'd get 2x plus negative y plus c. There you go. Okay, let's do a couple more things here. We got a little bit more time here. Let's go back here. Make into a true closed sentence. We have negative 3 plus something equals 0. Think of the equal sign as a balance. You see, both sides have to balance up to 0, okay? And all you can do is put something in the box. So what do you put in the box to make this true? You understand, all they're asking you is, what is the additive inverse of negative 3? Now it's a true closed sentence, right? Let's do a few more of these. Remember, think of the equal sign like a balance. Both sides have to balance out to the same thing. Well, if you combine these two here, don't you get negative 4 on the left side? Left side equals negative 4. So the right side has to balance out. So the right side has to be negative 4 also. So putting negative 4 in the box will make it balance out. That's a nice way of thinking of it. Negative 3x plus what equals 0? They're asking you, what is the additive inverse of negative 3x? Or, if this is going to balance out to 0, what do you put in the box to make this balance out to 0? The answer would be 3x. This one's kind of sneaky. These are a little bit harder, but if you think of them just right, they're not that bad. What do you add to negative 8 to get negative 13? Remember, both sides have to balance out to negative 13. You're going to have to put a positive number or a negative number in here. Think of it like a story. You lost $8, and then your friend came along and did something, and now you're down 13. So what did your friend lost some money? How much money did your friend lose? Your friend lost $5, didn't he? So let's see if this works. Is it true that negative 8 plus negative 5 balances out to negative 13? Yeah, that's it. Now, on some of these problems in the homework, you might want to simplify first. When you combine these two terms, you get 2. What do you add to 2 so it balances out to negative 20? Isn't it going to have to be a negative number? Think of it this way. You're 2 miles north of Seattle, and then you drive a certain distance, and now you're 20 miles south of Seattle. Don't you have to go south 22 miles? So negative 22. 2 plus negative 22 balances out to negative 20. All right, got a little bit of time here. Go ahead and finish. Do these. We'll go over them in just a second. Let's go over these. So the question is, you have negative 17 on this side, and you have 10 on this side. You got to put something in this box so both sides balance out to negative 17, you see? So that's why it has to be negative 27. It has to be a negative number. If you're down 17, and here you have 10 here, you had to have lost 27, so both sides equal the same thing. This one isn't too bad. What do you add to negative x to get 5x? You'd have to add positive 6x, right? This one, again, go ahead and combine these first. Negative 12 plus 5 is negative 7. What do you add to negative 7 to get positive 9? It has to be a positive number, doesn't it? Negative 7 plus what equals 9? It has to be 16. That's what you add to negative 7 to get 9. Now this last one, again, if you simplify these two, Negative 11 plus 16 is 5, so 5 plus what equals 5? The answer is 0. I guess that's it. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.